Sounds good.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Financial Frontier. I'm your host, Patrick Camuso. I'm very excited. I'm here today with Atikh Bana, the co-founder and COO of Acctual, an AP and AR platform that helps Web3 businesses streamline their operations. What we're going to discuss today is our experiences in Web3 and how they relate to financial operations for Web3 businesses. Atikh, thanks for joining us here today. Welcome to the Financial Frontier.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
Absolutely. And again, I appreciate you joining. So to get started, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and how you found yourself in Web3?
Of course. So I'm a designer by trade. So most recently was kind of where I spent most of my sort of designing and FinOps time over at Stripe, where I was working specifically on ASC 606, so sort of everything related to revenue recognition, and kind of helping companies streamline that entire workflow with all the invoices and subscriptions they had coming out of Stripe, but then also sort of bringing data into Stripe, where things got really fun. But prior to that, I was working kind of in traditional design and sort of developer space at a company called Datadog, where I kind of worked on identity and access management tooling. And so before that, it was sort of where I started sort of my Web3 journey circa 2017, 18, ICO boom at a company called Storage, STORJ. It was one of the first sort of decentralized storage protocols, where I was sort of one of the first product designers there, and I spent a few years kind of helping to build out the V3 network. So they had been at the architect of that for some time. And then fast forward, while I was at Stripe, I met my co-founder Momo, who later introduced me to Isa, our third co-founder, CTO as well. And the three of us kind of decided to go out and kind of figure out what types of problems we could solve as they related to sort of Web3 financial operations. And so that's where we met with a bunch of Patricks and sort of learned about sort of the landscape and sort of problems that existed, and kind of honed in on specifically AP and AR. Originally, sort of the strive was, what does sort of a Web3 build.com look like? It's always funny whenever I say that, people either respond with, well, no one wants to build a build.com. Other people are like, oh, I get what you're saying. And so really what it is just to try to make a true AP AR experience for digital assets.
Absolutely. Very interesting. So what were some of the main challenges when you were speaking to, CPAs and CFOs? What was sort of the common issues that you saw with their current financial operations as it relates to AP and AR?
Yeah, definitely. I think really when you put it simply, was just that, sort of financial operations generally became this game of telephone. We have all these different tools that are kind of doing different things, and they sort of feel like this impossible puzzle, where you have things over here that have specific context, things over here that have specific context, and you really are trying to consistently bring these things together. And if you think at the end of the day, what finance is storytelling. It's being able to tell the story of sort of what a business's sort of financial health sort of looks like at the end of the month, and pulling all those sources of that story to build that narrative, whether it's from the tools or talking to the founders or talking to the finance people to better understand, well, what was that on-chain transaction that you did? Or what was that wire that went out last week for $2,000 or $20,000? And effectively, when you can start to streamline a bit of these tools, which I think is the strive of anyone building in this space, is to sort of bring everything under one roof. I think that seems to just really be the biggest problem from what we had discovered from those conversations.
Definitely. And can you tell me a little more about Acctual, the company, maybe some of the key features or functionalities that you guys have recently rolled out, or that some of your core features and functionalities that you've seen deliver the biggest benefit to Web3 companies?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that the easiest place that we start is through our crypto native invoice generator. So one of the things that we kind of set out to do with that was just build a standard for invoicing in crypto. And you can find that at cryptoinvoice.new is the domain. And it's really the easiest way to do it. Without an account, you can require, or you have your vendors sort of send you an invoice using that tool. We've even found some of the really large foundations will use it to sort of spin up custom links with their information on there correctly, their wallet, their preferred networks and tokens that they sort of will pay in. And then sort of on the flip side of that, for anyone that's billing, a company that pays in crypto, this becomes a really easy way to set a lot of that stuff up. But then where we go from there now is sort of what we launched today, which is our payment link functionality on that invoice generator. And so with the two of those features combined, you can think of that as sort of the most lightweight way, no account, free to use way to sort of do APAR in its lightest form, which is create
Nice.
an invoice that's in crypto and pay an invoice that's in crypto and get a receipt when all that's sort of said and done. And then where we go from there is more of the proper accounts payable and receivables kind of modules that we've built out, where those hook up into your accounting systems, work pretty seamlessly around sort of your subledgers as well, leveraging sort of a clearing account. And then within that functionality specifically, we've got things like email forwarding to be able to bring in your invoices into our system without requiring your vendors be users of our platform. The ability to sort of mark fiat invoices so that if you aren't doing a ton of those, you can still kind of mark those in our system and get sort of a central repository of what's going on. And also the ability to kind of leverage OCR to kind of capture invoice details automatically, and then all the way down to sort of the ways that you pay, where we see a lot of teams will leverage kind of multi-sig safe wallets to be able to sort of pay versus going into that transaction queue and looking at these really long strings of numbers of like, okay, what am I paying? You get the sort of context of the invoice that you can sign and execute right within Actual without ever having to go to that safe module, and then having all that seamlessly sync into your accounting system with vendors kind of being associated with contacts that have wallet addresses and Actual and so on.
Very nice. Yeah. So that streamlines things to a very large degree. And, it takes us a long way from just sending wallet addresses via email and manually tracking these accounts payable and accounts receivable in spreadsheets. And so, this is solving a huge problem and starting to, develop more maturity in this space overall for building back office operations. So, there's a lot of different types of companies now that sort of encompass this term Web3 and that are transacting on chain. Are there any specific subsets or, sub industries that you have found yourself working with more at Actual, or, is there, I'm sure there's a few different ones. What's your perspective on that?
Definitely. Well, we would like to just think about sort of the market at large is that there sort of starts off with this circle of kind of Web3 native organizations and DAOs and foundations. But then what happens is that you start to sort of widen that circle when you start to think about sort of the extension of vendors or suppliers that are serving or working with a lot of these companies. And this can vary from sort of like smart contract auditors to designers, developers, all the way to sort of marketing agencies and sort of so on, and lawyers and so on and so forth. I'd say that what we find is sort of a little bit feature dependent. On the AR side, we tend to see a lot of utility from more of these service provider like organizations. So your dev shops, your designers, freelancers, contractors, things like that. And then on the AP side, you find is that more of these sort of foundations or Web3 native organizations that are sort of paying a lot of these invoices as well. And so that's why the two-sided network is so important, so that people can sort of
Definitely.
do both of those things in Actual. But I'd say that that's kind of been the breakdown so far.
Very interesting. And then in terms of, which blockchains Actual supports and like your company's overall perspective on blockchain coverage, I know that varies a lot just across technologies in general when we're talking about back office technologies like Subledger. So what's your approach on that? Is there a few chains you're focused on, or are you more competing across a lot of blockchains? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the things that we kind of do with our crypto invoice generator is that we sort of open that up to sort of include a number of chains. And what we use that for is to sort of serve as like a bit of quantitative measure to sort of understand what are the chains that people are most invoicing on. And what we sort of serve today from sort of an AP perspective and an AR perspective is sort of Ethereum, mainnet, and then a couple of the major L2s. We're looking to support other major chain that are EVM compatible, like BNB. We're also looking to sort of expand sort of our L2 coverage. We're looking at Solana. We're starting to see a couple more of those types of invoices. But to no surprise, the one chain that seems to just be taking the USD kind of stablecoin rails by storm is Tron. And so Tether on Tron continues to be one that we monitor, and we see a lot of invoices get generated on our invoice generator. And I think one will be supporting really soon as well.
Interesting. And then what are the the most common assets that you see getting invoiced? Is it mostly just stable coins? Is there any other assets? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, it's definitely been primarily stable coins, and really the only variety has been, sort of USDC, DAI, USDT, and then some variety in sort of the chains. So we see a little bit of Ethereum, we see some Tron, we see some Solana, and then we're starting to see more L2s. Like even us as an organization, run our treasury out of Optimism now, and so I think that we'll start to see more and more of that take shape as well.
Definitely. Now, I'm sure you've been working with a lot of CPA firms and CFO firms. So, what's been your experience there in terms of, their level of understanding of Web3, their level of openness to it, and the type of, financial operations that they're running with the firms maybe that you've worked with?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that the biggest thing that sort of these accounting firms or CPAs or kind of accounting firms that we work with has been sort of the time save. If I have 10 clients that I'm working on a monthly basis, and I can maybe build them a little bit less, or I can free up my time to sort of bring on more clients and sort of become more efficient from that perspective. That always kind of makes some ears pop up a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I'd say, yeah, for sure. And then I'd say kind of outside of that, they're always kind of looking for tools that feel familiar, kind of follow a process that they're used to. And I'd say that like the biggest impetus for Actual was accounting firms and CPAs who like just demand these types of, processes, and, anything that sort of goes out should be sort of AP, and then anything that comes in should be sort of AR, and then we need to be like documenting everything. And so that thing that's just really loved from a lot of finance teams, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. The more we can streamline operations, the more clients that we can serve. And I think the industry has matured a lot over the past couple of years in terms of the apps that are out there that assist accounting firms like ours. And I still think that there's a really long way to go. And as a CPA firm owner myself, I'm thankful that there's people out there like you guys developing these applications, because it really does help us assist clients at a greater scale and just a greater overall effectiveness as well. So I know you mentioned a little bit about, accounting integrations. Is that something that's in the future for you guys in terms of integrating with, both subledgers and general ledgers? Or is that something that you guys have started to maybe roll out some integrations? Where are you at in that part of the process?
Yeah. So right now we have direct integrations with QuickBooks and Xero, and we're
Very
looking
nice.
to support a few others. So I mean, we hear a little bit of NetSuite. Moneybird has come up as well, which is sort of, I don't know, kind of like QuickBooks in Europe.
Okay.
But what from a subledger perspective as well, I think that we've been really interested to sort of explore what it looks like to have more of these direct integrations there. So we're starting to do a bit more extensive work, I'd say, on that side as well.
Definitely. And what's your viewpoint on the subledger industry in general? Because it's obviously extremely fragmented. There's a lot of extremely great companies out there. What's your overall perspective on that space? Do you see them serving different sub niches as we sort of move forward in the next stage of things, or do you see more of a consolidation taking place, or sort of a mixture of the two?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually something I love to ask accountants who have clients on the various subledgers. I was chatting with one at ETH Denver a couple of weeks ago, and it's just sort of like, yeah, and very similar to what I always hear. It's like, okay, kind of dependent on the client's use case, and where they're at sort of stage wise. We'll recommend different subledgers for different
Yep.
things. And I'd say that, I think our perspective on this has always been sort of, to be a little agnostic around some of that.
Yep.
And, I think that there is maybe something to be said about being early to building, onto certain chains, and sort of winning some sort of early sets of users. But I'd say that generally, I wouldn't be surprised if there is more consolidation that we start to see there. I think that there will probably be attempts to sort of create a bit more convergence around this kind of financial operating system sooner rather than later. I know that there's already a few subledgers that are looking at sort of bill pay and things like that.
Yeah.
In our initial kind of thesis was sort of similar, where we wanted to be both a subledger and an accounts payable and receivables product. But I think ultimately the question that you are faced with when building a subledger and trying to build anything else around that is sort of this thing of breadth versus depth. I think that when you start to look at subledgers, you just get a lot of breadth that you have to consistently be adding to,
Oh yeah.
whereas AP and AR themselves just require a lot of depth. And even the subledger. I mean, even those specific chains, right? You get a network upgrade. You get this new standard. Now all of a sudden, things are out of whack. Client's data is not accurate, so on and so forth. And so I think that it'll continue to be hard to sort of get a lot of this stuff kind of right. But I think I think the more that we can just focus on, okay, we're going to be really good at like maybe these specific chains that we see kind of long term being really important. I think that approach probably is going to pay off in the long run, and I think that like I mentioned, we'll see probably a little bit of convergence. I think on that side too.
Yeah, I think we'll see some too. But like you said, it's a really big challenge. I think that these subledgers are facing in general between the evolving landscape of just Web3 in general. It's like every market cycle creates new chains, new assets, new ways of transacting, and they have to play catch up with that. And then we have all of the regulatory changes on top of that, which are going to require adjustments to the platform. And then there's a tons of different types of sub industries that are coming into the platform as well. So I think that there's a lot of moving pieces that they're all competing with. And yeah, I think we've seen some, sort of early signs where there's some acquisitions and some minor consolidations, and maybe we'll see more of that in the future. But I think it's going to be interesting to see, how it plays out. And we take a similar approach, to being, agnostic. I know some firms like to basically just partner up with maybe like one or two softwares, whereas, some like to stay more agnostic and sort of tailor the recommendation to each client. And that's been our approach, is staying more agnostic, seeing where is the client at, where is the client, going to be in terms of their operations and overall needs when it comes to just, the types of transactions they're performing, the types of chains that they're on, the types of sophistication that they need in their accounting system, and then trying to tailor a suggestion to that. So, it's been interesting navigating it from the accounting side as well. And that's been a lot of, what I've been working on over the past year, is assessing a lot of these new subledgers that pop up to make sure that we're constantly recommending the best solution at any point in time to a client that onboards. So yeah, it's interesting hearing your perspective on that as well, because you're sort of sitting in a similar seat, I think, as CPA firms to a degree, where you're assessing all of these subledgers and, looking at them for long-term partnerships. And that's what we're doing when we're looking to put our clients on them as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely not something you want to, ideally make a decision that you feel comfortable living with for quite some time. 6 months down the line, now all of a sudden there's issues and you need to get into another subledger and repeat that process that probably took quite a bit to set up in the first place.
Definitely. So, in terms of like your vision on the future of Web3 accounting, you see like a company like Actual integrating in with some of these platforms, or maybe a possible subledger solution in the future? Is that sort of up in the air still, or are you just maybe going to stay sort of hyper focused?
Yeah. I think that the one thing I know for sure is that we probably want to figure out how we can just streamline the process best for finance teams. I think
Definitely.
that jumping in between tools, and kind of navigating it from that perspective is just creates more friction and creates more of that game of telephone. So the more we can just kind of streamline information, I think will be most helpful. And that can look,
Definitely.
in any one of those forms, I'd say.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's such the industry is in such an early stage. It's really hard to see where it's going to go in the future.
Yeah.
And there's tons of great solutions that are out there. So, it's like you said, it's probably going to be a hybrid approach of both for, across the industry.
Yeah.
So I know you went from Web 2 to Web 3, and you've had a pretty strong career on both sides. What sort of advice do you have for people that maybe are on the Web 2 side of things, or are just an aspiring entrepreneur looking to get into Web 3, based off of your experiences and your background? What would you say on that?
Yeah, I'd say that kind of use that sort of background in sort of Web 2 to your advantage. I think that was one of the things that I felt kind of helped us just think about this opportunity a bit differently. There's just been a lot more sort of times at bat for some of the problems that we are solving for in Web 2. And I think that that's really a good kind of way to think about kind of experiences and how we build in a lot of ways. So I'd say that that's definitely one part of it. And I think two is the fact that like we're still really early. And I think that even if it can feel at times like we've solved something, or that, so and so companies at, this round or whatever, like, everything is still very much up in the air. I mean, look at Solana. I mean, like we look, just a few years ago, we thought that was a dead chain, and so it's like all of this is still still really early, and I think that it's just the time to sort of explore and tinker, but kind of use your background to your advantage in that tinkering.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also went from Web 2 to Web 3 with the Big Four accounting background in the financial services space. So we were doing a lot of actually similar stuff that we're doing now as an accounting firm in the crypto space, just dealing with large unstructured data sets that we have to categorize and reconcile for tax purposes. So I think, taking that professional background and then layering another skill on top of that, which is just the understanding of Web3 and crypto, and stacking those skills on top of each other can make you, extremely valuable as a professional, especially like you said, in a space where we're still extremely early and there's still a lot of growth. And we're sort of in this phase right now, I think, where, there's going to be a lot of regulatory changes and a lot of, maturation that we have to go through, and a lot of businesses that are going to have needs when it comes to, service providers like Actual and like Camuso CPA that can help Web3 businesses add more, overall sophistication to their finances. So what is do you think there's any sort of, roadblocks from like a regulatory perspective, or just overall, that if they're overcome, we can see more businesses starting to transact in crypto and starting to invoice in crypto, whether we're talking, seeing more transactions just from Web3 native businesses, or something that could push us over the edge and we start to see more, traditional Web2 businesses transacting in crypto?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the interesting kind of thing to this is just how kind of more global payments are, in that sense, where you're already starting to see a lot of adoption in other parts of the world, especially in emerging markets where access to a dollar is relatively difficult. Um,
Mhm.
and so that adoption, I think, is starting to happen a lot faster than in the States. And I think that in the States, I think that the regulatory landscape will definitely, hopefully, provide kind of more tailwinds for products like ours, and sort of what we're doing. But I think ultimately what we have, problem-wise, with sort of being paid or payment in digital assets is, one, people don't immediately think of stablecoins when you say that. They think of these really volatile assets, and they say, "Oh, I don't want to, get paid in that." And the other part of it is the fact that, like, the sort of first and last mile of those payments are still very much, I don't know. I just having a conversation with our investor who still can't get a Coinbase account, and so it's like just getting access to off ramping funds or on ramping funds. I think that needs to just become a lot easier, and maybe a little kind of abstracted away in some senses. I mean, there's teams like Beam who are building these like off-ramp addresses where you can effectively give someone a wallet address, and anytime funds hit that wallet address, it immediately initiates an ACH out into your bank account. And
Hmm.
so what does it look like then where you've extracted away, payments, from that perspective, where now you don't have to pay that 3% that Stripe charges, and you just pay whatever, it costs to sort of, under 1% fee to get those funds in your bank account, things like that.
Yeah, I see that same thing. And a lot of times, when you're dealing with a new Web3 startup that's maybe even raised funds on chain, they face that same roadblock where they may not have the off ramps established either on the digital asset side with exchanges, or even on the fiat side with bank accounts that are connected. And it can sometimes cause operational issues or liquidity issues. So yeah, the overall space still, is hard to navigate, especially for Web2 businesses getting into the space. But there are, tons of Web3 businesses that are, transacting in crypto. So we got a lot of work to do on that side of things. So are there any, case studies that you guys have from Actual of, certain businesses or a certain type of business that you've worked with that has really started to streamline things, maybe a CPA firm or some type of service-based business, or another type of business?
Yeah, for sure. One that we're working on publishing really soon is, with Collabland. So they're a pretty well-known name. They've been in the space for quite some time, but they regularly run kind of payments out of a multi-sig safe. And that process of sort of just kind of navigating the spot conversions of different assets that they pay out in, sort of doing those payouts, manually through safe, and not having that sort of context of the invoice, and matching those things up. Originally, we got connected with them through their accountant, who's part of this accounting firm, and yeah, I mean, he loves the product because it's a massive time saver for him in the way that we sync over to QuickBooks, and then the founder of Collabland loves it because he just gets this sort of one-click experience to be able to pay out all those invoices relatively frequently, and it ends up being a massive time saver, but also sort of a delightful experience as well, because it's not something that he has to sort of do any calculation or additional validation for anymore.
Definitely. Yup. It's all just streamlined with the app. So what is the roadmap? Do you guys have anything, planned for the next, few quarters or for the rest of the year in terms of features or functionalities? Is there any specific focus for you guys in the short term or medium term?
Yeah, I definitely think that the big focus for us is just getting more of this two-sided network enabled on both sort of a light version and then more of sort of an advanced version. We think that that ends up being really great kind of top of funnel for us. If the first way anyone wanted to create an invoice was through cryptoinvoice.new, and then if that became a funnel for anyone paying a crypto invoice without any sort of account or setup or talking with any human sort of thing, and then on the flip side of that, just continuing to enable more and more functionality, sort of deeper ERP integrations. One of the things we added recently was the ability to associate tracking categories with your invoices.
Nice.
And then more kind of functionality around like recurring invoices. If you've got, invoices that you need to send out regularly, being able to spin up, these sort of withdraw addresses and things like that. But I think one of the biggest things that we're excited about is more innovation around sort of the payment flow itself. So one of the things that we starting to see is that people might want to sort of pay out in crypto, but they want to settle in fiat for their vendor, or vice versa. Maybe they want to pay in fiat and then settle in crypto for a vendor. And so enabling more of those types of flows in a way that's incredibly sort of cost efficient and easy to use, I think is the other thing too. And I think that sort of outside of that, just continuing to sort of, like I mentioned, go deeper, because that being really important on AP and AR specifically.
Definitely. And do you see yourself possibly expanding to working outside of the service sector, maybe to SaaS businesses that are accepting payments once you start to add those features of like with the recurring payments? Because I can see a big benefit to that with just the recurring overall for, CPA firms, but then also I think, SaaS businesses as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the things that we continue to hear requests for, especially around kind of connecting into different data sources around sort of usage in some cases, or even just sort of, this is a contract that I've got for 12 months, or this is a person I want to bill on this sort of occurrence, and getting that stuff set up really easily. And then in addition to that, just thinking about sort of the different payment flows from that perspective as well, where maybe you want to settle in USDC as Camuso CPA, but maybe your vendor wants to pay in their utility token. But us
Yeah.
being able to sort of handle that conversion on spot, as opposed to you having to kind of finick with that at all, or them having to like swap and different, enabling more of those types of flows as well.
Definitely, and possibly even cutting down on the fees between everyone swapping to match currencies to pay into. So
Yeah,
there could be a lot of efficiencies there from a time perspective, even from a fee perspective.
for sure.
And I was looking over your LinkedIn profile earlier, and I encourage everyone to go check you out there because you post a lot of great content. But I think I saw one post about you guys. You're in several different countries, or you have several different countries using your platform. What are how many countries do you guys see using your platform currently, and what are some of the sort of biggest areas that you see usage from?
Yeah, for sure. So cryptoinvoice.news had users from across 60 countries so far.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I think one of the things that's been so crazy is just like seeing some of the invoices come through where you've got someone in Lebanon, and it's a service company or software company billing someone in China, or a designer in Afghanistan billing a client in America, and just seeing all these different kind of trades that happen. But I mean, that's what happens when you can sort of get rid of the borders and the corridors of money movement, through stablecoins and digital assets broadly. But I'd say that, yeah, in terms of where we see a lot of usage, I mean, it's typically sort of a lot of the countries that we hear of, often. So, countries like Ukraine, Nigeria, places in Latam like Argentina, Brazil, and then kind of the traditional, US, Canada, and then I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that stand out. Places in Asia like China, Japan, Hong Kong. And honestly, yeah, we've seen quite the spectrum, but I'd say that those are some of the ones that are more common than others.
That's great. I mean, you guys are facilitating, crypto's possibly biggest use case, and that is, like you said, cross-border payments and just reducing the friction and fees that are involved in that process.
Yeah.
So, I really like what you guys are doing over at Actual, and I'm really excited for the future of the company as well. Where is it best if listeners want to, connect with the company and possibly demo the platform or sign up for it? Where can they connect with you guys there? And also, if they want to connect with you directly and discuss their company with you, where's the best place for that as well?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm just Atikh Bana on LinkedIn. If you want to look me up, it's ATIKHBANA. And then my email is just atik@actual.com, and that's actual with two C's. And the easiest way to kind of find out about Actual is to just go to the website as well, which is actual.com, ACCTUAL.com.
Awesome. So you guys heard it, actual.com. Go and check it out. It can definitely help streamline your operations, whether you're a CPA firm, a CFO, or a Web3 organization. And to everybody watching, I appreciate you guys taking the time out to watch this. I hope you've taken some value from this. And until next time, I'm Patrick Camuso, signing off.